Hello and welcome everyone to week 3 of MPA 593 professional presentation. My name is Greg Zarko and this is my weekly presentation. So a brief overview of what I will be discussing this week. I will be welcoming you all to the Foothill AIDS project. I will be discussing the important documents that make up the Foothill AIDS project and also the required filings and record keeping. A little bit of background on the Foothill AIDS project, or FAP. In 1987, the HIV pandemic hit the U.S., and those that were affected with HIV really had nowhere to turn to for support. There was hospitals not taking them in. There was no medications, and the ones that did come out shortly after weren't very good. Um, so what this group of friends did is when they found out that one of their friends was infected with HIV, because it was affecting their community, they banded together. They met up in one of the living rooms, and they gathered supplies and they called their friends and they pulled in their contacts to do what they could for their friends. And that initially was the very start of FAP. So I felt it was important to include the mission and the vision of the Foothill AIDS Project. The mission is that it hopes to improve the lives of those affected by HIV through support services and to prevent new HIV infections through education and outreach programs. Its vision is that it hopes that um, we have a community with no new HIV infections. They do that by education, by promoting safe sex. And also, one of the other things they do is they educate the community around them to reduce the stigma of HIV and AIDS. A lot of people still think that it's a death sentence, which is not, thanks to medication. People have been living 20, 30 years. Um, also, some people believe that you can get HIV through kissing or through handshaking, which is not true. And so FAP hopes to educate the community to reduce that stigma. Okay, so next I will be going into important documentation that the nonprofits, specifically the Foothill AIDS projects, needs to operate. We'll be looking into the Articles of Incorporation, the IRS determination letter, and the Form 990. The first piece of paperwork that we will be looking at are the Articles of Incorporation. And the Articles of Incorporation are where you get the organization information, such as the company name and the corporate structure. And they're kind of like the guidelines for the activities the agency can carry out. So the Foothill AIDS Project is a nonprofit public benefit corporation. It is not organized for the private gain of any person. The specific purpose of the corporation is to disseminate information relative to the disease AIDS and to provide whatever assistance is necessary to those persons who have been diagnosed and living with this disease. Again, AIDS. The rest of the pages for the Articles of Incorporation show the signatures of the initial members of the agency, um, led by Jerry Diaz, who was the first director of FAP. Next, we have the IRS determination letter, and we can see that the determination letter was first issued in June of 1987. And donors may deduct contributions to the agency as provided in Section 170 of the Code. Um, Anyone who wants to know more about the agency can call the IRS at the number that's listed on the letter, or they can also go on the IRS website if they're trying to determine if the I'm sorry if the organization is qualified, and they can look up publication IRS publication 78. Finally, the last form that we'll be looking at is the Form 990. And for an incoming board member, this is an important piece of documentation. It generally is used to provide the public with financial information about what the agency does, like programs, activities, transactions. Um, it also includes the revenues, expenses, and assets. And what the 990 is helpful in doing, what the Form 990 is helpful in doing, is that it lets the organization know whether it provides the information within it to let the organization know if it needs to file a Form 990 or a different type of 990, like the 990EZ or the 990N. Um, if an organization either has over $200,000 in gross receipts or $500,000 or more in total assets, then it would have to file the Form 990. And by looking at the Foothill AIDS project, we can see that their gross receipts are well over 11 million, so that box is checked, and their total assets is close to 7 million. So the agency will have to file the Form 990. Who do you send it to? Or send it to the Department of Treasury in Ogden, Utah, or you can file it electronically. Um, and do all organizations need to file? No, not all organizations need to file. Like I said before, there's a couple of different 990s. But the other group, the biggest group that doesn't have to file are churches and other religious organizations. Um, the training said like seminaries or mission societies. And there's another small section of nonprofits, such as certain political organizations or foreign organizations that are located in the U.S. Whose possessions gross receipts less than $50,000. They do not need to file a Form 990. Any new person entering and becoming a board member to the agency should be made aware of the areas of risk that they can bring or can cause the agency some issues. So the first one that I'll be talking about is UBIT, or unrelated business income. Uh, a UBI can be income that's generated um, from many things, from T-shirts that are being sold. One of the examples was used was the Girl Scout cookies. Anything that's not associated with the main mission of the agency. So specifically for like the Foothill AIDS project, if they decided to advertise on their website, then that would be considered UBI. They would have to pay a business tax rate for that income that's being brought in. If they don't and they just assume that that's tax free, it can definitely cause problems. They can lose their tax exempt status. For gaming, uh, FAP holds an annual celebrity bowling event where they sell tickets to the event. They auction um, memorabilia or sporting event tickets inside the event. So that also can be considered UBI. You know, they need to make sure that they're paying the taxes on any kind of income that's being brought in by those events. Um, as far as political campaigning, as a nonprofit, they are supposed to be apolitical. They're not supposed to promote one candidate or another. If they do host somebody who has a position of an elected position personnel, then that person should come in as a private citizen, um, and and if they do open up um, the agency for political debates, then both parties should be, or any party that's running for elections should be able to participate. And anybody representing the agency is only speaking for themselves and not the agency. So board members can't go out and campaign, can't go out and and push an issue for a certain candidate with the name of the agency behind them. Any kind of donations that are over $250 should be given a receipt. Excuse me. Um, and the reason for that is because the person who donated the money could go back and it's tax deductible for them, and so their records need to match up with the records of the agency. If for some reason the agency is falling behind or not providing the proper documentation, and the person gets audited or investigated depending on the amount of what they donated, whether it's cash or car or property, clothing sometimes, um, then it could ruffle feathers and strain relationships between the public and the agency, and that could lead to less donations. And finally, the last thing that can get an agency in trouble is lobbying. Again, the agency is supposed to be apolitical. They're not supposed to lobby um, for any certain way. They the most they can do is if there's an issue that like HIV that they want to promote a healthy lifestyle. They have to be very careful with that what they want to say doesn't lead to one candidate, because if it does, then they can get in trouble and they have to pull back the reins on that. It's just easier to stay away from any kind of political lobbying or campaigning. That concludes my presentation for this week. I apologize um, if I sounded a little rough. Thank you for listening. I look forward to listening to yours. Have a good week and God bless.